Welcome back to Inside City Hall. In becoming House Democratic leader in the new Congress, Hakeem Jeffries succeeded one of the party's icons, the former Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, who led Democrats in the House of Representatives for 20 years. Those are big shoes to fill. So how will Jeffries' leadership style compare, and how will he balance the diverse Democratic ranks? Kevin Frey in our Washington, D.C. bureau joins me now with the final part of his week-long series. Good evening, Kevin.
Yeah, good evening, Earl. As we've wrapped up this week, I started talking to some folks that know Jeffries well, or at least know him from their time on the Hill, just trying to get a sense of exactly how they expect him to take on this new role. Here's some of what I found. It was the wee hours of a Saturday morning after days of delays when a long-standing House tradition finally played out. The minority leader passing the gavel to the newly elected Speaker, kicking off the new Congress. But before handing it over to Republican Kevin McCarthy, Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries first had someone he wanted to honor.
And without question in my mind, Speaker Emerita Pelosi will go down in history as the greatest speaker of all time.
Jeffries' elevation to top House Democrat is part of a generational shift for the party. Nancy Pelosi had already led Democrats for a decade when Jeffries entered Congress 10 years ago. Now, as he takes the reins, some who know him, like his first chief of staff, expect him to handle the job a bit differently than his long-tenured predecessor.
Her leadership style was more top-down, and I think Hakeem's will be more bottom-up and more inclusive, consensus-building, very deliberative, but yet decisive.
A New York Republican who has worked with Jeffries on legislation agrees.
I definitely think he will not be as top-down heavy. I think he's going to seek out input. I think he's going to surround himself with members that he trusts, that kind of dissipates some of the power.
As the incoming House Democratic leader,
Jeffries has already hinted at a collaborative approach. In the letter announcing his candidacy for Democratic leader, he promised to empower members of the caucus, ensuring everyone has an authentic seat at the legislative table. Here's what he said earlier this month.
As we go through this moment of transition, it will necessarily require a team effort across the House Democratic caucus, beyond the leadership individuals, in order to be able to take the baton.
Jeffries was the unanimous choice of House Democrats to lead them. But whether the caucus can stay unified in the long term is not yet clear. If Democrats win back the majority in 2 years, they will have the power to determine the House agenda, and there will likely be competing pressures from within the ranks to shape it, including from the party's left flank, with which Jeffries has at times had a complex relationship.
Is he progressive enough to appease the squad and members of the progressive end of the party?
There's going to be some fights. There's going to be some fights and some conversations, but that's what's supposed to happen, right? That's the point of democracy.
Congressman Jamal Bowman, a member of the so-called squad who is backed by the progressive organization Justice Democrats, is excitedly embracing his fellow New Yorkers' new job.
I've had many conversations with Hakeem around racial justice. We're on the same page there. Economic justice, we're on the same page. Universal child care, we're on the same page.
But others on the left are far more skeptical. Climate activists in the progressive Sunrise Movement condemn Jeffries for not joining other New York City congressional Democrats in signing on to the Green New Deal resolution. They question how highly he prioritizes the climate fight, even though the League of Conservation Voters gave Jeffries a lifetime score of 96% on their most recent National Environmental Scorecard. Some have criticized him for helping to launch a political action committee to support incumbents in primaries, seeing it as a swipe against progressive challengers.
I think that it would be beneficial for him to spend more time focusing on fighting Republicans than fighting those in his own party.
Jeffries has not shied away from pushing back, telling The Atlantic in 2021 that he would never bend the knee to hard-left democratic socialism.
You, of course, have gone after the left flank of the party multiple times.
Well, I wouldn't say that I've gone after the left flank of the party.
Okay.
When called upon to respond, I will at times not hesitate in responding, but it never is gratuitous in the first instance.
Former Congressman Tom Reed says that when ideological differences among Democrats emerge, Jeffries may have to rule with a heavy hand to force consensus, especially if margins in the House are tight.
He's going to maybe have to pivot back a little bit more to that top-down type of leadership, but time will tell.
As he's risen through the ranks, Jeffries' fundraising prowess has grown. As a House backbencher, but with token opposition, he regularly raised less than $2 million each campaign. That more than doubled after he became caucus chair. And in the last campaign cycle, Jeffries raised nearly $6 million. That still pales compared to Pelosi, who raised nearly $25 million ahead of the 2022 election. Now that he's in the top job, Jeffries' fundraising is likely to rise.
I expect that in 2024, we'll see all the chickens come home to roost and really his fundraising to become up with all of the people who have traditionally held these roles.
In the near future, one of Jeffries' main goals as Democratic leader is winning back control of the House in 2024. Democrats only need to flip a handful of seats, with many potential pickup opportunities back home in New York. If successful, Jeffries would be poised to become House Speaker. But what about the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue? At least one Jeffries ally floats the possibility.
I don't think that there is any ceiling on Hakeem Jeffries.
Is that something you'd even entertain?
No.
No desire to be president?
My focus right now is doing the best job that I can in the position that I hold, making sure that we deliver results for the American people, implement our successful legislative agenda that comes out of the last Congress, work closely with President Biden, make sure he's reelected, and do everything we can to win back control of the House of Representatives in 2024.
But that's taking it off the table entirely?
Yes.
Now, the scripture says in Galatians...
Leading the House of Representatives one day, though, is very much on the table. Only 55 people have been Speaker since 1789. Jeffries would be the first person of color elected Speaker and the first representing a district in New York City, cementing a remarkable climb to power for a son of Brooklyn who won his first election just 16 years ago.
Now, circling back to this idea of how is he going to be able to keep the ducks in a row, corral lawmakers, at least over the next 2 years, they're going to be the minority party. So, in theory, it's a lot easier for everyone to agree on opposing something, in this case, whatever the Republicans are proposing. So at least over the next 2 years, he has a time period to kind of work with all of his members across the coalition in kind of a unified front as he stares down potentially taking the Speaker's gavel, depending on how things turn out 2 years from now.
So in the vote for Speaker, there were 15 consecutive votes, and he had all 212 members of his conference vote for him each and every time. No dissents, yep. no absences, nobody walking out of the room. Is that a fair indication or initial indication of his ability to keep them all together?
It certainly suggests that they know how to count their votes on the Democratic side, while we saw all of the chaos playing out on the Republican side. And that was a point that he was certainly quite proud of. If you watched that last speech, if you were up with us at 1 o'clock in the morning when Jeffries was speaking before handing off the gavel, he emphasized the fact that the party is unified and they come into this Congress on a unified front. Certainly something that a message that he's trying to convey as he takes on this new role.
On that question of fundraising, Nancy Pelosi had only token opposition for her district back in San Francisco. When she raised $20 million, was that so that she could give it to other members to support them in that way? And is that what we can expect to see from Hakeem Jeffries?
Well, we've already seen some of that from Hakeem Jeffries, including also giving money to the DCCC, which, of course, is the Democrats' campaign arm, even in these previous cycles. Also, if we saw him, as we've reported, right ahead of the midterms, out on the campaign trail with some of these members. So that is part of the process and certainly something that he will be doing.